Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are checking out the Specna Arms Flex Series Airsoft gun. Specna Arms is a pretty recent entry into the United States airsoft game. I think they made a pretty big hit. I see them making a lot of waves. A lot of people are starting to carry them. So I contacted them and asked if I could check out one of their airsoft models. They actually sent me two, which was super kind of them, so thank you for sending those out. The first one we're going to check out is the Specna Arms Flex Series. As of filming this video, there are 3 different models of Specna Flex Series. Each one comes in either black or tan, so you've got 6 different models to pick from. The entire package overall is fairly modest. It comes with one of their S mags. This is a high capacity magazine. A CQB speed spring if you need to swap that into your gun to play at an indoor field. The obligatory and reasonably long cleaning rod. A couple of flyers with several QR codes. Their entire lineup if you want to check out their website via QR code. And the instruction manual via QR code. And something that's become strangely popular in airsoft guns lately is stickers. Lots of stickers. We'll start with the back of the gun, as always, and work our way forward. It does use a crane-style stock. You've seen these on airsoft guns for many, many, many years. They're simple, they work, and I think they've got plenty of battery storage and are fairly universal for a lot of different kinds of batteries. The back end is rubberized and is easily removable to install your battery. Pop off the back pad and the cover under it, and you've got access to your battery compartment. It'll store nunchucks, sticks, all kinds of things, but I would recommend a 7.4 volt battery for this gun in particular. Thankfully, the stock does have a couple of QD attachment points for your sling. That's how I ran this airsoft gun, because it's so light I can just single point sling it and just run it on my front. And it's really comfortable and fairly lightweight to do. The stock is adjustable, so you can move it to your desired position. The buffer tube is polymer. Now, I'm not going to take any points off because I've actually never had one of these break on me, but I always prefer metal just for the durability factor. The pro for me is it saves on weight, which this gun is extremely light as it is, so this simply adds to that. While we're focusing on the back end, I'm going to go ahead and show you the ESA, or Easy Spring Access quick change system for the spring. It's very simple. Take the stock off. You will need a long Phillips head screwdriver to go into the buffer tube and remove the screw and the metal plate itself. You can either use a hex key, or I like to use needle nose pliers to twist the spring guide out and swap your spring accordingly. The receiver itself is made of a nylon reinforced polymer, which that or a similar material is pretty common among this price bracket, entry-level, beginner style airsoft gun. It's not flexible, it doesn't creak, it's actually very rigid. It does give the gun actually a pretty well-built feel, and I'd be surprised if it couldn't take a drop or two. Something I really do like about these is they are individually serial numbered, and you've got all that info on the right side of the receiver, your holographic sticker, your QR code, and your individual serial number information. Pulling back the charging handle, we're going to have our adjustable hop-up. Down on the rotary wheel is more, up is less. It doesn't have a locking bolt catch, which doesn't bother me. It's just more parts, essentially. So you will have to hold this back while you're adjusting your hop-up. The charging handle itself has an extended arm here. I like to one-hand, like left side the charging handle, because I'm a righty, and it's a little simpler for me, so I do like the extended arm. The flip-up sights are minimal and are actually pretty well built. I really do like these. They're not spring-loaded. You'd have to manually flip them up each time. The rear sight is only adjustable for windage and has 2 peep apertures, a small and a large. And then the front one is adjustable for elevation. This particular airsoft gun style represents a really neat era in firearms and airsoft in general, I think, where it's got the older style crane stock, the pretty normal receiver, but it's got an M-lock rail to kind of bring it a little bit into the future, but still remain well in the past, which I think is a good mix. There's nothing wrong with the past. I really rather like it. Those classic style guns really work for me. So having a lightweight polymer M-lock rail, I rather like. Additionally, the rail itself is indexed. It's got plastic tabs on either side that link into the receiver, so it won't twist or become rotated or anything like that, which I think is a really nice touch. The gun does have a fairly short barrel, and something I did notice actually after playing with it for a game is that there's no fake gas tube or gas block in there. It might take away from the realism, but it's also a sub $200 gun, and I realize they're probably saving a few dollars not including that. It doesn't bother me a whole lot, but just something to be noted.
Getting close, getting really close.
The Specna Arms Flex internals. Before we check out the gearbox, motor, hop-up, and barrel, which are essentially the heart of the airsoft gun, a couple of notes. The pistol grip has metal screw inserts. I really like this. A lot of companies in the past have gone with just straight plastic, a single piece in the grip. Those will always strip out, so having metal ones essentially prevents that. Also, there are 4 screws holding the grip onto the gearbox and body instead of just 2, which is, I think, a really, really nice thing. A lot of companies generally go with 2, a handful go with 4, and I think 4 is the better way to go. The motor is pretty typical, about average torque and speed. The axle doesn't have a whole lot of resistance when rotating it. It does have an O-hole pinion, and the axle itself doesn't really have a whole lot of movement back and forth, so it's reasonably well shimmed to the can. It does have a rotary style hop-up. The drum on it is fairly stiff with, I believe, an O-ring underneath it, so it's not going to unspin your hop-up as you're shooting, which is nice. The barrel is made of brass, is a 603 bore, so it's a little bit tighter than your standard. The bucking is pretty typical. It's a regular mound in there. It's not an H nub or a flat nub or anything like that. A couple of notes about the gearbox. It does have a small port here, so if you want to take a screwdriver, hit the anti-reversal latch and uncycle your gearbox before you either take it apart or remove your spring, that's probably a good idea. Installed is the advertised 375 feet per second spring. Has a spring guide with a metal base and a plastic shaft. This particular gun uses 8mm bushings in the gearbox shell. They are bushings, not bearings. A quick note I'll make about the lubrication of the gun. It looks reasonably good. There's a fair amount of grease on the gears in places that you'd expect and want to have it. The piston head O-ring and piston are lubricated. There isn't anything on the tappet plate. It's not as big of a deal, but anything dynamic I tend to like to have lubricated. The compression system on the gun. The air seal's all right. I'd give it like a B or B minus. It'll get a reasonably good air seal, but it's not perfect. You're missing some O-rings in there that could help with the air seal a little bit. The piston is a steel tooth piston. The second to last tooth has been shaved down but not totally removed, so that does help with premature engagement a little bit. Nylon pistons, I've seen that tooth get chewed up way too much, so shaving that down I think is a great idea. The speed cuts on here are a nice touch. Piston head on the front, ported, same plastic as the piston. It does not have bearings behind it though. The tappet plate is reasonably flexible, not hugely stiff, but not hugely flexible either. The nozzle is pretty typical. It doesn't have an O-ring in there. It's a little bit different too. It doesn't have a taper to it. It's a straight contour all the way through. The cylinder is aluminum and ported for a longer barrel than this, so you get a little bit more air volume with the shorter barrel that this has. And the cylinder head is pretty typical as well. Single O-ring, rubber damper on the front. Now let's see how well the gearbox is shimmed. The bevel gear that engages with the motor has a little bit of play there. You could probably put a really minor shim on there and get it a little bit tighter. And the spur gear feels pretty good. Kind of hear them like spin out and sputter there. Now that happens on gear sets on occasion. But the shimming feels actually pretty decent. Probably some minor changes I'd make to it. But for a stock shim job, I'd say this is a pretty nice A- or so. The sector gear does have a small tappet delayer on there, which I think is a nice addition. The trigger switch on this gun is your typical TM style. It's tried and true and has worked for a long time. It doesn't have any sort of MOSFET in the wiring at all, so it's pretty basic.
Good. Guys, push up, hook right. Ready?
Ready, set, go.
Overall, the gun performed surprisingly well. I took this out to Nighthawk Airsoft for a game, and I'll tell you, it was a hot day. It was about 100 degrees, and I ran 0.32 gram BBs through it. Probably a little bit heavy for what the gun was really meant to handle. I'd probably say run 2 5s or 2 8s through it, 3s if you really need to, 3 2s. They're my standard BB, and it was probably a little bit too heavy for the speed this gun can put out. But nonetheless, it was able to hop the BBs very nicely, and I got fairly good groupings with it. Over the course of about one day, I used this in a couple of games in the city at Nighthawk Airsoft. And I'll say I was pretty happy with the performance. I was able to get surprisingly good groupings through windows and get quite a few hits with the gun, which is really awesome. You don't need a huge high rate of fire or super high FPS. You just need a pretty competent airsoft gun, and I think this fits that category. I think the best thing I can say about this gun is it's well built. It's not going to be a game changer for the entry-level sub $200 category of airsoft guns, but it's definitely a solid entry into that category. In the future, I would like to see Specna Arms evolve this gun even more. Internally, it's a little basic, so I'd love to see a MOSFET and maybe a slightly better motor installed in it in time. But overall right now, it's a pretty decent airsoft gun. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I think there are things it could do better, but for what it is, I think it works quite well. I think most people are gonna be pretty happy with the performance with it out of the box. Thank you guys for watching, and a big thank you to Specna Arms for sending this airsoft gun out. It's been a pleasure reviewing it. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next review.